Okay, that's more like it. Let's talk some Chiefs. Welcome to Monday Morning with Chief in the North. I am Seth Kaiser, the Chief in the North, because, I live in the North. I'm just going to start off this way. It's a good week to be a Chiefs fan. We are fresh off the Chiefs blowing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers out of the water. The final score, 41-31, didn't do necessarily the way the game went justice. A late interception that didn't really matter, an arm punt, so to speak. It was a good return on it. So, it led to the score being significantly closer than it would have been. I was looking at the numbers after the game ended. While the Chiefs won by 10 points, there really wasn't any point in the second half where the win probability for the Chiefs was below 90%. They controlled the game basically throughout. They obviously got a lucky break to start the game with a fumble on the initial kickoff by the Bucs. But overall, the Chiefs basically dominated a defense that was supposed to be specifically built to stop them from doing some of the things that they like to do. And on defense, and we'll talk about that soon, they did a good job, by and large, taking away the majority of what the Buccaneers wanted to do, other than, hey, Mike Evans is awesome. So every Monday, what I try to do here, or maybe Tuesday next week when the Chiefs are actually playing on Monday, I try to start off with a few things that I think are interesting that should dominate the coverage going into the upcoming week. As you can see, I am now back here at my office. Had a lovely little conference where I was out by the lake this last week. And so we'll make do. My view isn't nearly as good today, but what are you going to do? I want to talk about a few things that I think are important from the game that I think people are going to be talking about this week, starting with a couple of things that I'm actually writing about as we speak. By the time you're watching this, the article is probably going to be published on the Chief of the North Substack. And that is that the Chiefs seem to be unfolding more layers to their offense. And that's one of the biggest things that I took away from the game. Mahomes is awesome. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the Chiefs seem to be really kind of discovering after a terrible week against the Colts. And this is what happens early on in the season. You end up with overreactions one way or another, week to week to week, including by me. So that's always fun. But what they did against the Buccaneers, it wasn't just the fact that they won. It wasn't just the fact that they had a dominant offensive performance. It was the way in which they did things that was interesting to me. And what I wrote about was that they kind of felt like, at least to an extent, against a really good defense, they kind of had a happy learned how to putt type moment. And what I mean by that is you see the Chiefs offense doing some of the things that we've been screaming for and some things that we were hoping they would be able to do in a way that took advantage of what the Buccaneers wanted to do. First of that, people are going to focus on the run game. That makes perfect sense. I understand why. It wasn't just Isiah Pacheco getting more carries. That was certainly good, and he looked better. You should really check out the Chief of the North article on this. I wrote about some of the things that he showed in terms of patience and finding cutback lanes and things that he necessarily wasn't showing to be a strength of his in the preseason in terms of vision and that kind of stuff. You see the game slowing down for him a little bit mentally, which when you've got his physical traits, that's at least worth considering. It's at least worth looking at, and there's a lot of promise there. At the same time, Clyde Edwards-Helaire played a great game as well. He had one really horrific drop on fourth down, which was unfortunate and brought us all back to, whoa, we're not going to start snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, are we? But he ran the ball well. He doesn't have the same amount of burst or physicality that Pacheco does, but he runs the ball well between the tackles. He picks his spots well, and he runs very hard in his own right. And the offensive line really was the story of the day in terms of just completely dominating Tampa Bay's defensive front four, or really their front seven, in terms of moving the pile. And that's what happens. That's why when you have two different running backs that both have a ton of success, especially, maybe guys that haven't shown the ability to just, do it all on their own, that is how your offensive line is winning and winning big. And that's what was happening. So that's something, again, check out the Chief North newsletter. But what they were doing is they were running some power. They were running some gap against some of these too high looks, making the Bucs pay for trying to play more of a conservative shell. They were also utilizing heavier formation. They were running out of multiple personnel sets and multiple looks. And it was a really, really good way to make the Buccaneers consistently get behind the sticks on defense and also have to honor certain things. Robert Mays and Nate Tice talked about this on the Athletic Football Show a little bit, but one thing that they did, they've always utilized Kelce as a blocker in certain looks, but they utilized him on a couple of insert looks and a couple different times where they had him sealing off the edge like a more traditional tight end. Those are things that matter because teams have to say, crap, now we can't just count on Kelce only blocking in space or playing only like a wide receiver. Those things matter. Something else that I saw that I think really should get talked about quite a bit this week was their use of Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster. And I want to talk about Skyy more, but it was just a couple plays. So this week, we're staying silent. We don't want to spook Andy out of playing a rookie. But man, he showed some promise, guys. We'll see. So with MVS and Juju Smith-Schuster, the MVS and Mahomes finally connected on a couple of shots. And you can see the difference in what you're going to see from MVS's stat lines. If they connect on even one of those shots per game, it's going to be the difference of 30, 40 yards. And also those are drive flipping plays. And that's what he's there for. He's there to stretch the field. He is there, in part to do occasional possession receiver stuff, but that's not his best trait. His best trait is a guy that you get down the field, utilize his speed and length down the field. Juju Smith-Schuster played more of a role of running intermediate, shallow, physical route running, grabbing physical yards before and after the catch. That is something that the Chiefs desperately needed last year, and you could see it matter against a very physical Buccaneers secondary. Juju Smith-Schuster is able to play that game. He's able to run those routes against tight press coverage. He is able to push himself free. He's able to knock heads with defensive backs, as it were. It's something worth keeping an eye on because you can see those guys falling into those roles that we kind of expected them to and being utilized in a way that makes the Chiefs offense a lot more varied. Something else that's going to dominate the headlines this week will be Patrick Mahomes. I don't think I need to explain why. He just plays the game like no one else does, and he has plays where it just doesn't matter what the defense wants to do or what the defense tries to do, and it's completely, totally, utterly unfair and hilarious, and I enjoy watching it. So I can't wait to do his film review this week after we talk about some other things. One storyline that I don't think should fly under the radar this week, I think it will in some places, but I think other places will cover it pretty well. Yes, the defense gave up 31 points, and it was funny. I tweeted about the pass rush doing a decent job hurrying up the Buccaneers process and causing some pressure. And I got some pushback from people, what are you talking about? They're not sacking Brady. They're not getting the ball had to come out immediately. You saw, well, for one thing, some of the pressures they caused in the first half was one of the reasons why they got a lot of stops. We talked about this in week 1. The Chiefs were able to jump out to a big lead in week 1, not just because the offense was rolling, which they were, but also because the defense was making stops. That's how you're able to roll out a big lead. It's not just one team scoring, it's preventing the other team from scoring as well. And that's what we saw happen this week early. Yes, the Buccaneers were able to have some success just basically throwing up shot plays to Mike Evans, who Jalen Watson had some really good snaps against him, and he had some snaps that were good snaps, but he still gave up a catch. There's not much you can do. Mike Evans is an absolute stud. I would just say that with the defense, they were forcing fast throws. They were forcing Brady to move off his spot and show off his pocket presence. They were doing things to make him uncomfortable. The coverage was by and large good. They weren't giving up a lot of free, easy stuff. And that's without Trent McDuffie, who might be their best corner. We'll see. He was playing awesome before getting hurt, but he's a rookie, so I'm trying not to count my chickens there. And they're also doing it without Willie Gay Jr., who's one of their one-of-one guys. He's one of their most unique players in terms of what he can do in coverage. And so it's just interesting to me to see how well the Chiefs defense played. Yes, they gave up 31 points in the end. I would argue 7 of those were absolutely meaningless. And then, frankly, another 7 was in part because Tom Brady will never, ever, ever get called for intentional grounding, ever. He threw from a pocket. It was kind of just one of those funny moments. He threw from a crushed pocket to literally no one. And the refs were like, no, I think he was trying to hit, someone 5'10". I mean, there was no one within at 5 yards at the very least of that pass. There was no one that pass could have been intended for. And that's the funny thing. It didn't look like an aimed pass to anyone. It was just a throwaway. But whatever. The important part to take away from that is the Chiefs defense was able to give them some problems. And you can say, well, the Buccaneers offense has stunk this year. Yes, without Godwin and Evans. Without those two both together. When they've all been on the field together, they've traditionally been a very good passing offense. And the Chiefs really kept them from doing the things that they wanted to do. A final thing that I think people will talk about this week, although we're still early enough in the season that it's kind of an obvious thing, but the AFC, wide open. I am going to be frustrated one more time that the Chiefs dropped a game that they really should have won, and we talked about it, blah, 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 ad nauseum last week. The Chiefs could be the only undefeated team in the AFC right now. They should be. They're not, but at the same time, because the other AFC teams have dropped some games as well, it's not as fatal a flaw as it might have been. The Bills and the Dolphins, both 3-1. You're seeing some of that, the AFC teams beating up on each other a little bit. And so you see, the division leaders in the AFC North and the AFC South are both 2-2. The Browns, Ravens, and Bengals are all 2-2. The Jags and the Titans are 2-2. And then you've got the Chiefs at 3-1, and then a 2-2 Chargers squad that the Chiefs have beaten already. The Broncos are 2-2. The Raiders are 1-3. I just can't bring myself to be afraid of the Broncos and the Raiders right now. We'll see how the Raiders play on Monday night. They sometimes play the Chiefs really tough. Sometimes they get blown out of the water. We'll kind of see how that goes. But the point of all this is you don't have any one dominant team emerging from the AFC like people thought. Everyone thought it would be the Bills initially, maybe thought that it would be the Chiefs. Then, maybe it's the Dolphins. Maybe it would be the Ravens. No, it's really not anyone so far. Teams have all shown some flaws. And so really, with a relatively wide open AFC so far, it puts the Chiefs, those are my Post-it notes, that puts the Chiefs in a position that I think they should be very happy in, regardless of how it occurred. If you said going into the season with that first 4-game stretch, knowing that they had a game against a really tough Chargers team, a Colts team that was supposed to be better than it was, frankly, and then obviously a really tough Bucs team. And then, last year the Cardinals were a playoff team. They're not as bad as the Chiefs made them look in week 1. And you said, they'll be 3-1. You'd take that all day. That's where the Chiefs are right now. There's a lot to write about this week. I'm going to try to touch on the Substack on a lot of these things that we've already talked about. But in the meantime, I think those are some of the most important takeaways from the game. And it's just a great week to be a Chiefs fan. I can't wait to write and talk about more of this stuff. Oh,